Welcome to Brain Scratch, Case Cracked, the show where we look into a mystery and what is the critical piece or pieces that help solve that mystery. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. We want to thank Taryn for bringing this story to us. This is one that I like to call Justice for Aroha. Luana Chiki Kirhoma had lived a hard life. After spending part of her childhood in a New Zealand state ward for children, she moved on only to find herself at the hands of abusive partners. When she finally broke free from that cycle, she found herself alone and pregnant. She was at one of the worst points in her life and didn't know how she would carry on. But when her lovely baby girl was born, she vowed to live life differently. This new baby, named Aroha, which means love in Maori, would be her reason to carry on. As she grew up, Aroha showed she was a true Scorpio, a feisty mixture of girl and tomboy with a lot of daydreamer thrown in for good measure. People found her laugh to be so contagious it made others laugh with her, even if the joke wasn't funny. Chiki would have other children after Aroha, and for them, she aimed to build a household free of violence that would give them a better start in life than the one she had. At times, her daughters complained that she was overbearing, but Chiki always reminded them that she knew what was out there. As a survivor of domestic violence, she had a mantra for her daughters, one that she believed would save them from the hurt and heartache their mother had suffered. The first time he hits you, you run. You run to the ones that love you because they will protect you. Now 28 years old, Aroha lived near her family in Naughton, New Zealand, where she worked full-time for traffic management. Her passion was her serious boyfriend of 5 months, Dylan Davis. The two had been living at an address on Dominion Road, and her family hoped that maybe he would be the one for her. Chiki knew that Aroha had dreams of settling down, having a baby, and buying a sewing machine so she could make gowns. She hoped Dylan would be the one to give those dreams to her daughter. But those hopes and dreams would soon be dashed. On February 4th, 2018, Davis frantically called emergency services. He told the operator that he had returned home from a friend's house at about 1:30 that afternoon to find Aroha lying lifeless on the floor of their garage. When paramedics arrived at the scene, it was clear that she was dead and had suffered for at least a few hours. Police were called, and as officers taped off what had now become a crime scene, they started to question Davis. He stated that the day before, he and Aroha had spent the afternoon drinking and listening to music in the garage. That evening, he went to a friend's house and stayed there the rest of the night. When he returned home the next morning, he found Aroha in her current state. The assault had only happened hours before. Officers hoped that somebody in the neighborhood may have seen something suspicious, and they asked local residents for any information. Dominion Road was known to have a transient population, with many people moving in and out of rental properties. Aroha and Davis hadn't lived there long and had caused no trouble in that time. Late that afternoon, detectives had the sad duty of telling Chiki that her daughter was now dead. She had worked so hard all her life to keep her children safe from violence. The news of Aroha's death sent her into an emotional tailspin. Although she doesn't remember much from that day, she does remember that one of the detectives told her, quote, "She said to me, 'I promise I will not leave Aroha alone.' That was huge for me. I knew my baby wasn't alone. How do you repay that? You can't." A day later, investigators would announce that they were treating Aroha's death as a homicide. By February 7th, police tape had come down. Investigators had been unable to find much in the home itself. None of the neighbors reported any suspicious activity, and there were no signs of forced entry. The only lead they had was Davis himself. When Aroha's family was questioned, her mother could only remember a few times that her daughter had made questionable comments about her boyfriend. One which was particularly disturbing. During one visit, Aroha had blurted out that Davis had bitten her. Given no real context about the bite, she would tell her family that he said he was annoyed that he didn't draw blood. As her sisters shared little tidbits of conversations, Chiki began to realize that Aroha had been holding things back from her family. But if her daughter was in trouble, why didn't she reach out to someone? Chakee had reinforced that with her daughters so many times. An autopsy showed that Aroha died as a result of multiple blunt force head injuries. Her nose had been so brutally beaten that her nasal bones had been driven back towards her skull cavity. Her skull was fractured, and there were 18 bruises on her face, along with bruising to her chest, torso, and left shoulder. All of Aroha's injuries were consistent with the use of fists. There was no evidence of defensive wounds showing that the attack likely happened very quickly. The medical examiner told investigators that Aroha had been alive for a time after her beating and could possibly have been saved if someone had just called for help. When officers started to investigate Davis's past, red flags began to fly. In July of 2011, he was jailed for 2 years for charges stemming from incidents in 2010. While drunk and armed with a hockey stick, he had smashed the windows of a local business. Davis told police he did it for fun. But those charges were small compared to the next 2 strikes he received. In New Zealand, 3 strikes laws are a new type of law designed to selectively incapacitate repeat offenders by mandating increasingly lengthy prison sentences for those convicted of particular types of crime. Davis's first strike warning occurred in 2014 when he went to a family dinner he was not invited to, started a fight, and cut one of the guests' abdomen with a knife, requiring surgery. His second strike was for aggravated robbery in 2015. This time, he beat a man on a public walkway and stole his cigarettes and cell phone. The judge believed that Davis was a risk to the community and that his offenses seemed to be getting worse. He would be released from prison on August 12, 2017, just months before Aroha's death. During questioning, Davis admitted the day before the murder at about 2 p.m., the couple had purchased a significant amount of alcohol and spent the afternoon drinking while listening to music in their garage. What Davis didn't know is that investigators had also accessed Aroha's last texts from that night. Shortly after 7 p.m., things took a very dark turn. As Davis became more intoxicated, he began to beat Aroha. No longer feeling safe around him, she texted an ex-boyfriend, saying Davis had been hitting her. Records show that her last text message was sent at 11:58 p.m., and her ex sent messages at 12:08 a.m., 12:15, and 12:31, all with no response. As he became increasingly worried, he continued to text Aroha off and on throughout the night. She never responded. Davis's phone records show he began a series of phone calls to friends at 12:33 a.m. Davis changed his clothes and walked to a friend's house nearby. The man admitted to police that when Davis arrived, he said that he had killed Aroha and that she, quote, had it coming. After leaving that address, Davis was picked up by another associate who also said Davis told him he had killed Aroha. When the man asked him how he knew she was dead, Davis replied, "I made sure I finished the job. I was choking her out while she was still gargling on her blood." He then spent the remainder of the night at yet another friend's house before returning to his garage. Still denying that he had anything to do with Aroha's death, Davis was arrested and taken into custody. On Tuesday, March 27, 2018, Dylan Davis appeared via audio-video link from prison in the High Court in Hamilton. Initially, he had pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder, but on this day, he changed his plea to guilty. The judge would state that during the course of Davis's criminal career, he had accumulated over 40 previous convictions, 12 of which were for violent offending, including 2 assaults on females. When he was interrogated about the murder, investigators described him as being brutally honest. He stated that incarceration for the rest of his life would be necessary to keep society safe, and if he were to be paroled in the future, the only thing that would prevent him from reoffending would be the death penalty. During the sentencing phase of his trial, seats in the courtroom were filled with Aroha's friends and family. Many of her whānau, which is Maori for extended family, wore black t-shirts emblazoned with the words, "Justice for Aroha." Davis was sentenced to life in prison, and a resounding cheer erupted from the audience. However, he would be eligible for parole in 20 years. When Justice Davison was asked why he had given the man a chance for parole when he had clearly stated he would never stop offending, the judge said that, given the average life expectancy, a life sentence without parole would mean Davis would be in jail 3 times longer than other offenders if the 3-strike law was applied. He had some strong words for Dylan. Quote, "Your attack on Aroha was cowardly. The public will not tolerate domestic violence on women." Today, Chicky is a heartbroken mother who feels she let down her daughter, saying, "The one thing I tried to save her from took her from us." She can't stand to think about her daughter's death, but feels that by sharing her story, other lives can be saved. In honor of Aroha's memory, she has a message for other women. The first time he hits you, you run. You run to the ones that love you because they will protect you. If he tries to control you, get out. If he tells you what to wear, what to say, what to do, get out. If he tries to isolate you from the people who love you, get out. If we can save one life, it will never really make up for what happened to my daughter, but at least we can honor her in this way by saving another life. It's a lonely world to be in as the mother of a murdered child. Case cracked. We'd like to thank stuff.co.nz, Otago Daily Times, News Talk ZB, the New Zealand Herald, offenders.sst.org.nz, and of course, Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's story. There is a little bit of an aftermath to this. There was an appeal filed. Davis's lawyers argued that 20 years in jail at his young age was cruel and unjust. They claimed that his previous offenses, although awful, were not particularly serious, and he would be too old when he was released. The court said he deserved what he got, and they wound up denying his appeal. For me, Chicky's statement about being a parent of a murdered child really grabs at my heart. I've spoken to so many people in these circumstances, and it's truly terrible what they go through. And I just want to put out there a reminder that if you're in a family where a homicide has happened, please look into Parents of Murdered Children at pomc.org. Even if you're not a parent, they have many different ways to help family members with all the different steps and phases you'll be dealing with in handling this in your family. There's a link in the description box below. Another important consideration to all this is to remember that households are now made up of all kinds of different relationships, which makes more people potential victims of domestic violence, not only intimate partners. We discuss this and much more on a page that I've put together on domestic violence over at www.brainscratchers.com. And in honor of today's story, we've also added a list of organizations that help abuse victims specifically in New Zealand. Thank you to the New Zealand Herald for putting that list together. We'll also have a link to that article with their list of resources in the description box below, so you can find it really, really easily. On behalf of my amazing supporters via PayPal and Patreon, we are making a donation in Aroha's name to Shine. Shine is an organization whose vision is to have safer homes in New Zealand every day. They're working to stop domestic abuse with their 5-prong approach: support, learn, act, reflect, and share. Please consider joining me in supporting them. You'll find a link for them also in the description box below. Before I end today's video, I want to give a big thank you to patrons Tammy Rader Erickson, Kirby, Cassandra Gabbard, Lisa Anderson, Courtney Lynn, Stephanie Sanford, Jennifer Kavanaugh, Lindsay Bailey, and Anastasia C. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit www.lordandarts.com. There, you can sign up for PayPal, sign up for Patreon, or buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here doing what I love doing, learning about justice, how to keep ourselves and our families safe, and of course, spending time with you. I'll be back on Wednesday with a new episode of Searchlight right here on the Lord and Arts channel.